think it's recording. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for attending our webinar today. Today, we're going to focus on frevvo's latest release to cloud. It's version 10 has been released to cloud, and I wanted to show you some of the new features and capabilities and how we've made it even easier to create workflows using this guided designer. There are a few other things in version 10 as well, but we're really pretty much going to focus on the guided designer and how you can easily create a workflow using the form and a workflow and the business rules and everything associated with it using that guided designer. This version is currently available in cloud. We're in the middle of final testing for on-premise customers as well. And once that testing is completed and migration and other considerations have been suitably tested, we'll be releasing this version to cloud, hopefully in the next several weeks coming up this year, let's put it. I'm not sure of the exact release date. So I'm not going to spend any time in this webinar on any slides, but really just jump right into Frevvo, the app itself. And we're going to create an invoice approval workflow, something that's pretty common requirement. We see a lot of customers wanting to use Frevvo to approve their invoices. So we'll create a relatively simple workflow. Starts with an employee filling in a form to request approval for one or more invoices. We'll then route that to a manager for approval, to that person's manager for approval, and then to a VP. Conditionally to a VP, we'll add a precondition that routes it to the VP only under a certain condition. Let's say the grand total exceeds a certain amount, and then finally to finance for payment. So I'm going to log in here, and let's see. I'm going to log in and create an account, webinar@ashish.com. So I've got a project in there called testing. Let's ignore that for the time being. So there are two ways really in which prospects, customers can get started with Frevvo, started creating a new workflow. So you can click this plus button here and click on install a pre-built template. So let's say you're interested in doing an invoice approval workflow. You can even search here for a keyword invoice, and you'll see there are a few examples that are available. And you can simply click install on any one of those, and it's going to install a workflow. It'll launch a little wizard to show you. You can always click on this workflow and check it out and see what the starting workflow is: invoice, manager, VP review, payment, etc. And you can also always run this workflow at any time. And you've got a pre-built template that serves as a starting point for creating your workflow. Okay. These templates are available for a variety of applications, not just invoices, purchase orders, new hire onboarding, and consent forms, a large number of these applications. And they're also available on our website, so you can try these templates out at any time. But a number of customers want to start from scratch and create their own form and their own workflow. So let's take a look at how easy it is to do that. Let me just delete this one so I don't get confused later on. So I'm going to click plus over here and say create a new workflow. So let's add it to a new project. We'll create a project called invoice approvals. Click next in here, and let's give that workflow a name. We'll just call it invoice approval workflow. You can give this workflow a description. These descriptions are useful because the search capability that you have in here, when you have a lot of forms and workflows, when you click on that search button in there, it searches through a number of things, but one of the things that it does look at also is the workflow description. So it's always useful to put a meaningful description in there. So this workflow routes from employee to manager and optionally to a VP to approve invoices, something like that. You can put in whatever you want in here, of course. I'm going to click the next button here, and now you have a chance in this wizard to just answer a few questions and kind of describe the basic routing of your workflow. So in this case, as I mentioned, our workflow starts with an employee, so we'll call it an employee. We'll call the first step employee. In this case, yeah, we want to create a new form. The employee is going to start the workflow, so he or she is simply going to fill out the form that says which invoices do I want approved. The next step after that is going to be the manager. So let's call it manager. It's going to be an approval step because the manager is simply going to approve that employee's request. Now you can right here route to an email address to a user or role. By default, it just sets this up to route to whatever email address you're logged in as. So for your logged in user. And so we're going to leave it at that for now. Let's call this step VP, and this one finance. So it routes to finance. We'll just leave these at the email address for now, so it's easy to try it out. And then we'll configure it to route to specific people, users, or roles later. So we've just specified in here that this is employee to manager to VP to finance. Click on the finish button here, and you'll see that frevvo has now generated a workflow for you. You can see up here that to those of you who are familiar with prior versions of frevvo, you can see that the UI has been changed, hopefully improved. We think so for sure. This is your workflow going from employee to manager to VP to finance. You can see as you click on the workflow, the settings panel now appears on the right-hand side here. And so, for example, if you look at the assignment, you can see that it has been assigned to that email address as we specified in the wizard, and some default notification email steps have been created for you. The same thing for the VP step, the same thing for the finance step. One of the nice things in this new designer is you can flip very quickly back and forth between these steps and keep the appropriate tab in the properties panel open, something that a lot of customers asked for, as well as our client services team. And we'll see as we configure this workflow and customize it to meet our own needs, how much easier that makes things. You can always dismiss this by clicking the X button and come back to just the basic workflow in here. Now up top, there's a guided designer panel up top, which lets you navigate between the various aspects of the workflow. So every workflow typically has at least one form. There may be more than one form. There are business rules associated with controls in that form. You may generate some PDF, and then of course the workflow itself has some settings as well, configuration of the overall workflow itself. So if you click on the form here, you'll see that the form loads. It's the same form designer that many of you are already familiar with. And in this case, you can see that as you entered information in the wizard, the system has generated a few fields just to make it convenient as a starting point for you. So there's a section called My Items. There's first name, last name, the fields that we see people very commonly have in every workflow. This identifies the user or the person who's actually starting the workflow. And then since we specified that there's going to be a manager, a VP, and a finance, and that they were approval steps, the wizard has generated manager, VP, and finance steps, and created a section for each step and put some default stuff in there. You can enter some comments, add an approval signature and a date. And the reason it's created this kind of signature and date is because we specified the routing to an email address. If we had instead specified routing to a user or to a role, it would have generated a digital signature. And we'll add a digital signature somewhere so you can see what's going on over there. If you click on the rules tab, you can see that frevvo has also generated a number of rules for you. So here's an example business rule. It initializes in the first step, as I mentioned, when the first step is employee, it's going to set up those first initial fields that were generated. It's going to auto-populate first name, last name, etc. In those fields. It's also generated several other rules. For example, on or after the manager approval step, it's going to show or hide the manager automatically for you. So you don't have to do all of this tedious work of creating these common rules. The wizard's just going to generate that for you. In this case, we don't have any PDF mappings. It's not going to be relevant for this workflow. But in another example, such as, for example, new hire onboarding, when you bring on a new employee, you may want to generate a federal W-4, a state W-4, a federal I-9 form, and you can insert those PDF mappings right here. And finally, here in the settings, you can see the settings for the overall workflow. Again, it's just going to leave everything here at the default in this wizard, and you can customize this. Now, just to be sure, this workflow that's been generated is fully operational, fully functional. You can actually run it. You can click this little wand over here and see that the form pops up. You can see that the first name, last name, manager ID, email, etc. have been entered. I can sign this. When I click continue, you can see that we had set it up to route by email to an email address. Whoops. And here is the email. The email, oops, it's on the wrong screen. Let me just bring it out here. You can see that the email has been sent. Your approval is needed. You can access your task. When I click on that link, you'll see that the form now loads. It's showing me the first field. It's now showing me the manager step because we're now at the manager step. So you can see how the show hide functionality automatically worked. Same thing again. We should get a new email, which taking a second to appear here. Here's the new email. Click on the link in that email, and you'll see that the workflow now has loaded at the VP step. The manager step is already in here. I can sign as the VP, and so on. Continue and route to the finance step. So essentially, the wizard has already generated a basic approval workflow with all the steps that are necessary to route this workflow around, get it approved, show hide rules, and a basic form for you. Now, typically, of course, your specific invoice approval is going to be different from whatever was generated by the wizard, of course. So now let's go in here and customize this, and let's see how we can change this so that it more matches what a typical invoice approval might actually have. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the form here. So we'll go to the form here. Let's do some basic stuff like make it look a little bit nicer. Let's put a title up here. Invoice approval, we'll make it, we'll give it no style. I don't know, make it bold, make it centered, make it a little bit bigger. So we've got a little header over there called invoice approval. Now, in an actual invoice approval workflow, you need to have some invoices. So let's add a section in here for invoices. Now you can see the drag and drop to create your form is very easy to use. Most customers find this to be super easy. We're going to add a section here called invoices. Let's add a payee field here. Make that payee a little less, not as wide. You can make this thing, you can put little icons on these things. They just look nice, so it's a little easier. People like to fill those out. We'll click required here, so you see how the background automatically turned yellow. That means that the payee field is required and the form cannot be submitted, or the employee cannot submit the form and send it to the manager for approval without providing the payee information. Now we'll add a table in here for invoices. So I'm going to drag and drop a table control in here. We'll put in a date field in here. We don't need this one, so let's delete it. Click on the date and we'll say this is the invoice date. That's the date on which the invoice was sent. Let's call this one a description. And well, we don't want the text field here, so I'm going to drag and drop a money field to the right. I'm going to delete this text field, and we'll call this an amount, for example. Okay, so I've created a table in here, and the table has, I'm going to allow the user employee to send in for that table at least one invoice and up to a maximum of 10 invoices for approval at any one given time. Now you can change this, the name of this table if you want. This is sort of almost irrelevant because it isn't actually visible on the form, but it's good to always have a meaningful name. So what have we done here? We've added an invoices table, or invoices section. We've added a payee field. We've added a table with one row of that table is required. Let's make sure that the date, description, and amount fields are also all required. So essentially one row, a date, a description, and an amount is required. Let's also add a grand total in here. So I'm going to take a money field and drop it in here again. We'll call it a grand total. And what we'll do is we'll set up we'll create a business rule in here so that the grand total is automatically computed. So the first thing we'll do in here is disable this grand total, so the user doesn't need to type it in. We'll automatically compute that grand total for the user. So let's go there and add that rule. So we've got a grand total. We want this grand total be the sum of all the amounts in here. So let's go to the rules section here and click plus. So call this rule calculate grand total. We'll run the rule builder. And this is a wizard that allows you to run, create a wide variety of business rules. Now, we won't have time in this webinar to really explore the rule builder in detail, but we have recordings of existing webinars, and there should be a webinar coming up very soon that focuses very much just on this rule builder. So in this particular case, we want to compute the grand total as the sum of all the amounts. So there's really no condition. We always want to compute that grand total. And what do we want to do here? We want to set the grand total to, and in this case, it's going to be the sum of, I think we called it amount. Yeah, sum of all the amounts. And that's it. You know, we click finish over here and we've got our rule. If you want, you can click on this rule code in here and you can see what's going on behind the scenes. That frevvo has actually generated a business rule. The JavaScript behind the scenes has got a loop and it's got some complicated syntax in there. But fortunately, with the rule builder, we don't really have to worry about it. Now, one of the other things you can do in this version here is you can organize these rules. So I'm going to drag and drop the grand total below the initialize. So I always like to have that initialization rule first, and then the rules for each specific step later. So the good news is you can organize these rules as you want. Again, a feature that a lot of customers have requested, and our client services team has also requested us to create, is now available because a lot of forms we've noticed do have a lot of rules. Customers have created forms, large, complicated forms with dozens and dozens of rules. It's nice to be able to organize them. Okay, let's see, what else might we do in this form in here? Let's just take care of a few little details in here. You know, eventually we're going to want to generate a PDF or some sort of printable view of this, but this is just an informational message. So let's unclick printable here to make sure it doesn't appear in the print view. And then let's also make sure that the My Items and the Invoices section appear on page 1 and that the Manager step appears on starts a new page. So you just do that by adding a CSS class called fPageBreak to this, and we're all set with the changes that we made to the form. So what have we done here? We created a My Items with a signature field. Now, typically, you wouldn't have a signature field here and a signature on the invoices, but just for demonstration purposes here, on the invoices section over here, I'm going to add a digital signature. So you can click on security here, switch this to text/signature image, and click on must sign. So now you can see how a sign this section button has appeared down below, and the user will not be able to submit the form and send it forward for approval unless this invoices section is digitally signed. We could do the same thing for any of these sections. It's doesn't seem that same thing over here. You can click on manager over here, click on signature, click on wet or text signature, and that same thing will appear. I'm not going to bother doing it right now because we already have it up here, and we've created some auto-generated some rules to automatically populate the date for this particular signature field. So I think we've sort of got a basic invoice approval form here. I'm going to basically have my information entered automatically and figure out whatever invoices we want. Well, one other thing that might be useful to add here is an upload control. So let's basically add an upload control here and say attach invoices here. So you could basically allow people to also attach PDFs or probably PDFs of the actual invoices that came into your form if you want it. Okay. Now that we get the form set up, let's go back to the workflow here and configure the design, the messages and other parameters of that particular workflow. So if you remember in the wizard when we created the workflow, when we answered the questions, we routed everything to an email address. But that's not typically how workflows get routed. So when I'm an employee, I typically will route, when I need approval, it's going to have to route to my manager. So fortunately, in the form, I probably should have pointed that out. I'll go back there just to show you. There's a manager ID field that's been generated. And there's a business rule in here, which automatically initializes that manager ID to my manager. So frevvo automatically knows who my manager is. And I can go to the workflow and in that manager field, click on that assignment tab and say, I'm going to assign it to that particular manager. So I can type manager here and you'll see that that manager ID comes in here. Let's delete this assign to email. And now what we've done is we've set up the workflow so that instead of routing anonymously to a specific email address without where it says no login required, it's going to assign to a specific user. And that user will be dynamically determined by whoever the logged in employee is. Okay. Let's also change the subject and the message of the email. I've got a few pre-created things here. I'm just going to copy paste. So again, we've used a template here. You can see this is a workflow notification, invoices submitted by. We're using templates in there, so the subject of the email is also going to be dynamic. And then the same thing for the content of the email, the message in here. You'll see that I've created a message or approval is required. And there's a number of templates in here. And then there's also a link in here for the user to be able to, whoever receives the email to be able to click on. And there are a variety of things you can do in here. By default, there's a link. A lot of customers use a feature of frevvo called Spaces, which is essentially a portal. You can log into your portal and your pending tasks are shown in your task list and you can process them that way. So again, there's a lot of flexibility in what you can do in here. So we've done the assignment for the manager and set up a task notification email. Let's do the same thing for the VP, except this time, instead of routing to a user, we'll route to a specific role. So you can just start typing in here and you'll see that frevvo will search and find all the roles that match. In this case, we're going to assign to a role VP. There's no email, there's no user, nothing else available in here. We again want to set up the subject and message for the VP step, and it's very convenient just to be able to click on the manager step, copy, flip back here, paste, go back to the manager step, copy, flip back here and paste, and just whatever, make a couple of little edits in here, something like that, and set up the assignment for the VP step. So what have we done so far? We've set it up so that the manager step will now route to a specific user determined dynamically. We've set up the notification subject and message body. We've done the same thing for the VP. For completeness sake, we might as well do the same thing for the finance step in here. Go in here. We're going to leave this at the assigned to email. We could always change it to send to a finance role or whatever, but we'll just leave it for the time being. I'll just set up come on, mouse. So set up a notification messages for all the 3 steps in here. Okay, so now that we've done the assignment and the notifications, let's also switch over to the messages tab so that when the user actually submits the workflow and clicks the continue button to send to the manager, you see a meaningful message. You can also go into the settings tab here and set the label. You can say call this send to manager. Oops, sorry, it should be up here. On the manager step, you want the label to say approve invoice, perhaps. On the VP step, I don't know, send to finance. And in the finance step, finish invoice. Go back to the manager step and let's look at these messages in here. So the task information, this is the message that appears in the task list. So when this workflow routes to the manager and the manager looks at it in his or her task list, you're going to see whatever is in here in that task list. So rather than something generic like this, you may want to type something like, I guess it's called invoice date. So invoices from first name, last name, on submitted on so and so date are going to appear in that task list. In the history message is what appears in the audit trail. So this is again a very important feature. A lot of customers uh, really want invoice approval, PO approval, whatever workflow they're actually running to make sure that it has an audit trail that's retained by frevvo. So frevvo has this feature built in. You can customize the contents of that audit trail by putting whatever message you want in here. And using templates, you can really make that message dynamic, so it's very easy um, to see what exactly happened during that particular step. The pending message here is something that what's displayed on the screen. So when the employee clicks send to manager or for whatever the button is to continue and send it to the manager, this is the message that will appear on their screen. It's going to say your invoice was sent to your manager for approval, something meaningful again, so the employee knows what exactly happened. Again, the same thing here. We're going to copy paste this into the VP and finance. So we're going to go in here, copy that into that step. In the VP step, same thing. Something like that. And and finally here, for example. So what we've done now is we've the wizard generated a workflow. We customized the form for that workflow. We added a header. We added a couple of sections. We added some business logic behind the scenes there. We rearranged those rules. We also came back to the workflow. We customized the assignment. So instead of just assigning to an anonymous email, the manager step is now routing to a specific user. The VP step is routing to a specific role. We customize the notification emails, and we also customize the messages that are displayed on the screen. Let's just do a few other quick things in here. Let's add a precondition. So remember, I mentioned to you that we're really are internally in the business, we only require VP approval if the amount exceeds something. Let's call it $10,000. So we're going to click on add precondition here, and let's say amount greater than 10,000. Oops, 10,000. Run the same, click on run builder, and you'll see the same rules kind of wizard, business logic wizard appears. In this case, there are no actions. It's just when do you want this precondition to be true. So we're going to say when the grand total, let's say it's more than 10,000. So when the grand total is more than 10,000, you'll see that if the amount is greater than 10,000, it will route to the VP. Otherwise, it'll skip the VP step and go directly to finance. Okay, so we added a simple precondition. And then let's also do one thing that, again, a lot of customers like, which is let's add a little notification after the manager. So we'll click the send email here just so you have an idea. We'll send this to the email address. And we'll basically send, essentially what we're doing here is we're sending a on invoice date. So we're just sending a status update to the person who originally requested the invoice, telling them that their invoice was approved by the manager. Now, of course, this is something that you can always go and look at in the audit trail for that particular workflow, but it's nice to get an update. And again, this is up to you. It's something that sometimes customers like and sometimes they don't. Don't like getting unnecessary emails. So it's totally up to you if you want to add this this kind of notification and take advantage of this capability. So the workflow is now going from employee to their manager. Once the manager approves, it's going to send an email to the employee saying it was approved by the manager. it's on to the next step. Then if the amount is greater than 10,000, it'll go to the VP. Otherwise, it'll skip the VP, and then finally it'll go to finance for approval. So we've customized the form, we've customized the workflow, we've added some rules. Let's finally go into this settings tab here and take a quick look at how you can set up the basic settings for that workflow. Let's make sure we click Save PDF. So the PDF of this workflow is going to be saved to the repository. You can deploy this right here. You can switch this over to production. We'll click Save Load here. Save Load simply means that at any step in the workflow, a Save button will be displayed, and you can just save a partially completed step into your own task list and come back to it later. Okay. I think we can take a quick look at the access control here. It really determines who can start the workflow. In this case, we're going to leave it at anyone, but you can set it up so that only authenticated users and only the designer or owner, you can really customize it and specify which roles and which users can start the workflow. And very much the same thing for any of these things. You can really customize, provide fine-grained access control for various aspects of running or managing the workflow. Messages, we've already customized them in individual steps, but if you didn't want to do that, you can create a default message for the entire workflow. If you set up a default here, and then the step doesn't override it, it will automatically default to the workflow level thing. Click on the workflow actions here, and this is the message that's displayed when the workflow completes. So in this case, what we're going to do is just display a thank you message and say and tell the person that we're going to send an email notification to the original responder. So all we're going to do here is display this message. You can display a message, a different success and error message. So you can click on error here and say, well, something went wrong. The workflow did complete, but maybe we weren't able to notify the user. So why don't you contact them to let them know? Document actions. So the workflow actions determine what's visible on the screen when the workflow finishes. Document actions determine what happens to the data. You can do a wide variety of things in here. In this case, we're going to send an email. So we'll send an email to the requester's email address. We'll call the subject final status update, and then set up a very basic message. Something like that, Your invoice was processed, thank you. In this case, we're going to send a PDF snapshot. We'll also send any attachments that were included along with the workflow, for example, the actual invoices. So the PDF snapshot is simply the PDF of the workflow. Remember, we created a page break so that the approvals print on page 2 in here. So there are a number of things you can do. We don't have time to get into all of these details. You can find a lot of info on that in the documentation. You can do a lot of things. Send it to Google Drive, web applications, file systems. You can send the data, individual documents to specific URLs, and so on and so forth. But one of the last things I want to do in here also is in the Styles tab in here, you'll see that you've got options here to customize a few of the things in that PDF. So let's set some basic margins here, and also set the footer in here, and basically let's print a page number. So this is again a template. It's going to print down below page 1 of 2, 1 of 3, whatever or 2 of 3, whatever the number of pages you have in here. And there's plenty of other customization you can do. This configuration wizard is large and has a number of properties, but I think we've done most of the basic things that we need to do in here now. So let's give it a shot. Hopefully I didn't make too many mistakes in here. I'm going to click on that trial button in here. So I'm logged in as the employee. And you should see the first name, last name, the manager ID. So this is going to be my manager. It's a user called manager. I'm just going to sign in here. You can see that I can't submit this because there are invalid fields in here. So I need to enter a payee. I need to enter at least one invoice. So let's call the invoice on so-and-so date. I got red widgets for 1,200 bucks. And then we also got some blue ones. Let's make them expensive so that the amount does exceed $10,000. You can see, of course, that the grand total is being automatically computed as the sum of those two amounts. To attach invoices, you can simply click on Add Files, choose, and I don't know, go in here and find a particular file. Um, whatever. I'm going to ignore attaching an actual invoice in here. How do I dismiss this dialog? Okay. Sorry, that dialog was huge. And then I still can't submit this workflow because to the next step because this sign this section, remember we required a signature in here. When I click this sign this section, you see how it automatically generates a signature, attaches a date, and locks this section. So this is a digital signature that's a real PKI encrypted signature generated by frevvo behind the scenes. Different from this signature where when we clicked on it, the signature just appeared. This signature, we don't actually know who you are. You can sign this wet signature without necessarily being logged in or authenticated, but in this case, you must be authenticated. Now that I've completed this first step, I can click on Send to Manager here, and you'll see that the message we displayed, your invoice was sent to your manager, the email notification contains a link, et cetera, has showed up. Let's take a look at that email notification. And you can see that the email contains the text that we basically specified. Your approval is required. You can access using this link. In this case, you're not going to be able to access it now because the workflow has routed to a specific user, the manager, and it can't be accessed generically. We could log in right there, but I'm going to log in separately here as manager. So if you remember, that user was called manager. And you can see that there's a task list displayed in here. And here's my invoice approval workflow from Jim Kirk. You can see that the history message here does have invoice approval workflow processed by Jim Kirk. That's what we put in our first, in each of those history messages. So you can see in the audit trail what exactly is happening at every step of the workflow. I can click this play button in here, and you can see the invoice approval workflow shows up. The original items that were filled in by the employee are visible. The manager step is now visible. I can put in a comment if I want, whatever, something like that. And I'm going to basically put in a signature and click on Approve Invoice. When I click on Approve Invoice, you'll see now that the system has sent it to the VP for approval, and that's because the amount exceeded $10,000. I got that notification email. Remember we set up an email notification coming back to the original employee saying, here's a status update. Your invoice was approved by your manager. Nice to know. And then I also got a separate notification email about that was sent to the VP. So for the VP step, again, there's notification. The link is available. I can click on the link. I must log in. And when I'm logged in as a VP, again, you can see that this time the manager step is visible with the manager approval. The VP step is visible, and I can approve as the VP as well. And I'm going to sign off here, go to finance. And now in this case, because the finance step is anonymous, I don't need to be logged in. And that's just how we set it up. So invoice has been approved for payment. I can click on this link here and you'll see that it shows up. I'm going to basically sign it as the finance and put in some comment. 120, click on finish invoice here, and the workflow has completed. Now, when the workflow completes, what happened is that a PDF of that workflow was sent to me as the original requesting employee. And you can see that it contains an attachment, which is the actual PDF of the workflow itself. bring that up. And you can see how we've got the margins. The PDF shows up. It's reasonably nicely formatted. And of course, you can put your logo. If you put a logo on the form, if you put any colors, you can adjust all of those things to your requirements. That page 1 of 2 has shown up down below, and all the approvals, the manager, VP, and finance approvals are also visible in here. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to quickly. Oh, a lot of notifications here. Pop to over here is if we go back and now look at this invoice approval workflow in here, we can go into the submissions view in there. And you can see this workflow that I just submitted in here. You can see all the signatures, the PDF, that same PDF that was sent by email is also visible, stored over here since we had checked that save PDF box. And then the actual data is also saved away as an XML document for potential integration with other systems in the future. So that's a quick look. Hopefully we stayed mostly in time. Yeah, in just about 30 minutes, we were able to start from scratch, use the wizard to generate an invoice approval workflow with multiple steps. Try it out, and then we're able to customize the form, add business logic, customize the workflow so that we set up the routing to match our actual desired routing, created a precondition, set up notifications, messages, configured the actions that take place at the end of the workflow, set up the configured the PDF so that we were able to put some headers and footers and some spacing to make it look nice, and did all of that in just about 30 minutes without writing a single line of code. Hopefully using a designer that's much easier to use and very intuitive. It's very easy to see how you step between the various things that you might do in a workflow, and in a very convenient way. One last thing before I see if there are any questions here is you can really do the same thing in a form also. Think of a form as a one-step workflow. There's no workflow piece here since it's not being routed, but everything else is exactly the same. So you can basically create a form, set up the business rules, flip back and forth between those screens using the same guided designer. Again, this guided designer and the updates are now available to all cloud customers. They're in testing and QA in the final stages of QA for on-premise customers, and hopefully they'll be released soon. So thanks for attending. I know we have my colleague Megan on the call as well. Megan, are there any questions that I can answer?
Hi, Ashish. Yeah, do you mind switching my role to organizer, and then I'll take a look at the attendee questions. And in the meantime, I have one question I know of, which is you actually might have showed forms responsive for a mobile device, like if my users want to use it on their smartphone.
Yeah, everything is just automatically going to work on a mobile device. You can sort of get a feel for that over here if you click on this test button here, and you can look at the test view of the form. If you click on this tablet computer here, you'll see what the workflow form looks like on your tablet computer. You can click on the phone icon here and see what it looks like on your phone. And you can see that, yeah, everything is automatically and completely responsive. You don't really need to do anything. Now, certainly there are some customizations that are available for phone and tablet computers, but in general, you don't need to do anything. It just works automatically.
Super.
The same thing for task list, signatures, approvals. Everything will work on your mobile device as well. Okay.
Thank you. Now, Ashish, you mentioned integration. Can I integrate with my SQL database?
Yes, that's a great question. That's one of the most common things that customers do with frevvo. So we certainly have a very powerful integration with the database using with SQL databases using our database connector. You can get a look at some examples right here. If you go to our website and click on resources templates in here, and click on database SQL. You can try a couple of examples online. So here's a simple example of a well, it's a looks simple, but this is a customer order example. So this is an example of a this form, this pick list in here has populated from a backend database. Hard to tell, but it has been dynamically populated. When you select a customer here, you'll see a list of orders for that customer pop up. You click on an order, you see the line items for that order. Click another order, you see the line items for that order update. Select another customer, the list of orders changes, you can select that order. So super dynamic forms connected to the database. And by the way, all of this is done without writing a single line of code. And there's other use cases you can do, master detail forms. You can basically run stored procedures, really perform any sort of CRUD operations against the database using the database connector. And if you're interested in database integration, certainly contact us. We'd be happy to help you. We have a lot of material, including webinar recordings, tutorials, and so on and so forth that'll help you get started with the database connector. Okay.
All right, super. Thank you.
Okay, great. Was that it, Megan?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again, everybody, for attending. I appreciate your time. A recording of the webinar. The webinar has been recorded, and a recording will be available. We'll put it up on our website and send you a recording as soon as that is available. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.